Level 1, the line cook. You're 22 years old, and the kitchen is the most beautiful place you've ever been. The heat hits you the moment you pass through the swinging doors. A wall of it, carrying the smell of caramelizing onions and searing flesh and burning oil. This is sensory overload. This is pure aliveness. You're the newest person on the line, which means you get the worst station. Prep. You spend 12 hours a day breaking down vegetables. Your hands become raw. Your fingers develop permanent calluses. Somewhere around hour 8, your hands stop hurting because they've gone numb. The knife becomes an extension of your arm. Your brunoise carrots so small you can barely see them, and the head chef walks past, barely glances at your station, and says nothing. Silence is approval here. There's a hierarchy in this kitchen, and you're at the bottom of it. You're treated like a tool, not a person. The sous chef yells at you for being slow. The other line cooks ignore you unless they need something. The chef de cuisine makes you redo your mise en place 3 times because the lemon supremes aren't perfectly uniform. But here's what you feel underneath the humiliation. Belonging. For the first time in your life, you're part of something that matters. You're not special yet, but you're learning to become special. You're learning the grammar of excellence. The pay is terrible. You make $16 an hour for 60-hour weeks. You live in a shared apartment with 3 other cooks, and you spend what little money you have on knife sharpening services and books about technique. You watch videos of chefs you'll never be on YouTube at 2 a.m. You obsess over the micro movements of their hands, the timing of their seasoning, the way they taste things. Your family doesn't understand. They think you're wasting your time in a kitchen when you could have a real job. You try to explain that you're not wasting time, you're apprenticing. You're learning a craft that takes decades to master. They don't get it, but you don't need them to. You have the kitchen. The kitchen is enough. But beneath the joy, something darker is forming. You're learning that your worth in this world is measured only by what you produce. If your food is mediocre, you're mediocre. If you're slow, you're weak. If you complain, you're soft. You're internalizing a voice that will never be satisfied. You're learning to torture yourself in the name of excellence, and you're learning to call it love. Level 2, the rising star. 5 years in, and you've moved up to the sauce station. You're controlling flavor now. You're tasting and adjusting, tasting and correcting. Your palate has become impossibly refined. You can taste a pinch of salt that's imperceptible to anyone else. You can identify when a sauce has been reduced 30 seconds too long. You've developed a sixth sense for when something is right. You're getting noticed now. Other restaurants are calling. A Michelin-starred establishment wants you as their lead saucier. You'll take a 40% pay cut, but that's not the point. The point is that you're being chosen. Your name is starting to mean something in a very specific circle of people who care deeply about food. But something has shifted inside you. You're no longer just learning. You're competing. Every service is a test you might fail. Every plate that leaves your station is a referendum on your competence. You've started having anxiety attacks during service. Moments where your hands shake and your vision narrows and you can't breathe properly. You go to the bathroom and splash cold water on your face and return to the line like nothing happened. You've also stopped enjoying food. You used to love eating. Now eating is analysis. You sit down at a restaurant and instead of tasting, you're deconstructing. You're understanding the structure of the dish, seeing the techniques, knowing exactly what went wrong with their beurre blanc. Food has become a language of judgment rather than pleasure. Your romantic life has evaporated completely. You were dating someone for 2 years, but the relationship died because you couldn't be present. You were always thinking about work, always wondering how your seasoning techniques could improve. Your partner told you that you checked out emotionally, and they were right. By the end, you were having sex with someone who felt like a ghost. Your mind was always somewhere else. You don't have friends anymore, only colleagues. And with colleagues, you're always performing. You're always the most ambitious, the most dedicated, the one who stays after service to organize the walk-in. You've learned that vulnerability is a weakness that gets exploited in restaurant culture. So you've built walls. Very high walls. You're also getting angrier. Small things trigger you. A commis using the wrong knife, someone adjusting your plating, a guest sending back a dish. Your anger is immediate and volcanic. You've yelled at people in ways you'll regret later. But you don't apologize because apologizing would mean admitting that you're not perfect, that you make mistakes, that maybe your pursuit of excellence has a dark side. So you rationalize. Everyone is incompetent. You're right to be angry. They're holding you back. Level 3, the sought after. Now you're getting offers from prestigious restaurants constantly. You're being hunted. Michelin inspectors know who you are. Food writers are calling you a rising star. You're in your early 30s and you've achieved something most people never achieve. You're genuinely excellent at something. You're in the top 1% of people in your field. You choose a 3-star restaurant. The kind of place where a single meal costs $300. The kind of place where mistakes are not forgiven because the clientele expects perfection as a baseline. This is the major leagues. This is where you prove that you're not just good, you're exceptional. The pressure becomes omnipresent. You're no longer just cooking. You're the face of the kitchen now. You're designing tasting menus. You're setting the vision. The entire operation is an extension of your mind, which means every failure feels personal. When a table doesn't finish their food, it's a rejection of you. When a critic writes something lukewarm, it's a referendum on your worth. You start sleeping 4 hours a night. You're in the kitchen constantly, 12 hours during service, then another 4 hours planning, prepping, thinking about what went wrong today and how to fix it tomorrow. Your body is running on adrenaline and coffee and the peculiar high that comes from intense stress. You're losing weight. Your clothes hang on you. You look gaunt. You've also become a perfectionist in a way that's become pathological. You remake dishes that are already perfect because they could be imperceptibly better. You taste every component 5 times. You've made employees cry with your criticism. You've destroyed plates of food because they weren't good enough to serve. You're aware that you're becoming someone difficult to work with, but you can't stop. Your standards are the only thing between excellence and mediocrity. Your sexual life has become about conquest and control rather than connection. You occasionally take home people from the restaurant world, other cooks, servers, people who understand. But it's mechanical. You don't really want them. You want the feeling of winning. When it's over, you feel emptier than before. You've also started using drugs to manage the anxiety. Nothing extreme yet. Mostly stimulants to stay sharp, occasional cocaine at parties to feel something other than grinding pressure. You tell yourself everyone in fine dining does this. That's true. You're all just trying to numb out the fact that you've sacrificed everything for the ability to cook food perfectly. Your family has given up trying to understand what you do. Your mother calls sometimes, and you talk for 10 minutes while you're lying in bed at 11 p.m., too tired to move, too wired to sleep. She asks if you're happy. You don't know how to answer. Happiness seems like a concept from a previous version of yourself that no longer exists. Level 4, the private chef. At 35, you receive an offer that changes everything. A billionaire who owns 3 tech companies wants a private chef. Not for entertaining, for himself and his family. He's offering triple what you make at the restaurant, plus equity in one of his ventures, plus a house on his property in Aspen. You take it. For the first time in your career, you take something just for the money. But here's the thing, the money changes the relationship to your work in a fundamental way. You're no longer cooking for critics or awards or validation from your peers. You're cooking for one specific person. Someone with incredibly refined taste, incredibly high expectations, and the absolute power to fire you whenever he wants. Your new employer is brilliant and deeply neurotic. He has 7 different allergies that he talks about constantly, even though he only has 3. He wants you to predict his cravings before he knows them himself. He brings home dinner guests and expects you to create a tasting menu at 3 hours' notice. He tastes everything you make and comments on minute details. The dish is too bright. The acid balance is off by a fraction. The temperature is somehow wrong even though it's 72 degrees. The isolation is complete now. You're living on a rich man's property. You're not part of a restaurant community. You're not getting recognition or respect from other chefs. You're invisible. You're a craftsman in service to someone else's palate, and that person is never satisfied. But the money is extraordinary. You're making $450,000 a year. You own a house in a different part of the city. You're financially secure in a way you never thought possible. And here's the terrible part. That security feels like a trap. You can't leave because no other job will pay this well. You can't complain because your employer pays for your life. You're golden handcuffed to perfectionism and servitude. You've developed a specific kind of psychic pain in this phase. You're more skilled now than you've ever been. Your cooking is genuinely impressive. But nobody sees it. Nobody cares. You could create a dish that's literally a work of art, and your employer would pick at it while checking his phone. The lack of witness to your excellence is slowly driving you insane. You've started drinking heavily to manage the rejection. Wine with lunch, something stronger with dinner. You sleep poorly despite the exhaustion. You have vivid nightmares about being unable to cook. Your hands don't work. You've forgotten techniques. The food turns to ash in your mouth. Level 5, the celebrity chef. Word spreads in certain circles. You're not just good, you're the private chef for someone notable. Other billionaires want you. Celebrities want you. Hedge fund managers want you. You become the most sought-after private chef in the country. You're no longer cooking for one employer. You're now contracted to 5 ultra-wealthy families, cooking for them on rotating schedules. The money is now obscene. You're making nearly $2 million a year. You've bought a penthouse apartment. You own cars you've never driven. You've hired a personal assistant to manage your calendar. You're on a private plane once a month. By any objective measure, you've won. You've taken a craft that was once pure, just the love of making beautiful food, and you've turned it into a vehicle for extraordinary wealth. But the cost of this level is that you've completely lost touch with why you started cooking in the first place. You no longer taste the food. You prepare it, you plate it, you present it, but you're no longer experiencing it. You're executing a choreography. You're a human machine that's been perfected to the point of hollowness. You move through your kitchens, you have 3 now, 1 in each major city. Like you're a ghost. Nobody sees you. You see nobody. You've become what you always feared. Invisible. The relationships with your employers are increasingly transactional and cold. One of them has started leaving written notes about what he wants each day, communicating exclusively through text. Another one tried to fire you because she gained 2 pounds, as if you had control over her metabolism. They pay you enormous sums because you're reliable and excellent, and they never have to see you as a person. You've also developed a serious coke habit at this point. You're using daily. It makes sense in a weird way. Cocaine is essentially crystallized perfectionism. Keeps you sharp. Keeps you from feeling. Keeps you performing at the level that everyone expects. You tell yourself it's not an addiction because you can afford the best cocaine, because you schedule your use strategically around your work, because you're still functioning at an elite level. You're not sleeping normally anymore. You sleep 4 hours, then you're awake for 20 hours. Your circadian rhythm has completely broken. You've become someone who exists in a permanent state of exhaustion and stimulation. When people ask how you do it, you smile and say you love what you do. You've become an excellent liar. Level 6, the invisible master. At 42, you've cooked for presidents, celebrities, tech billionaires, and people whose names you're not allowed to know. You've created dishes that would make other chefs weep with envy. You've mastered a craft so completely that you could cook in your sleep. And you're more miserable than you've ever been. Your apartment is perfectly maintained and completely sterile. You own art you don't look at. You have expensive wine you don't drink. Everything in your life is a status symbol, and you despise every symbol. You despise the fact that you care about them. You despise the version of yourself that sacrificed everything to become this. You can't remember the last meal you truly enjoyed. You can't remember the last human conversation that wasn't transactional. You can't remember what it felt like to cook just because the act of cooking brought you joy rather than pain. That person, the 22-year-old line cook who felt alive in the heat of the kitchen, is completely gone. You've replaced him with a perfect automaton. The physical cost is showing now. You have ulcers. You have high blood pressure. You have tremors in your hands from the cocaine use which you're managing with beta blockers. You look at yourself in the mirror and don't recognize the person looking back. You look exhausted. You look angry. You look like someone who's been slowly dying for 20 years. But you keep cooking. You keep showing up. You keep creating perfect dishes for people who barely acknowledge them. You keep optimizing and refining and pursuing a standard of excellence that will never satisfy you because satisfaction was never the point. The point was to prove something, to prove that you were worthy, that you were special, that you mattered. And now you've proven it so thoroughly to so many people that you've forgotten why you needed to prove it in the first place. The worst part is that you're genuinely, objectively excellent. If anyone in the world would know whether you're a great chef, it would be the ultra-wealthy people who can afford to hire the world's best. And they keep you. They pay you extraordinary sums. They never fire you. So there's no external validation for the internal destruction. Everything from the outside looks like success. But inside, you're hollow. You're a vessel that's perfectly designed to serve others' desires with no desires of your own. You've perfected yourself so thoroughly that you've perfected yourself out of existence. And the saddest part is that it happened so gradually that you never got to say goodbye to the person you were. Doctor's diagnosis: the psychology of culinary perfectionism. The journey from line cook to celebrated private chef is a masterclass in the ways that excellence and pathology can become indistinguishable. It's a story about how the pursuit of mastery can transform into a form of self-destruction that's socially sanctioned and even celebrated. The initial appeal is straightforward and healthy, the satisfaction of craftsmanship. But this transforms at each level. At the rising star phase, the satisfaction begins to be replaced by anxiety. You're no longer enjoying the process of cooking, you're performing under pressure. Your brain starts associating the kitchen with threat rather than pleasure. This creates a trauma response where your body floods with cortisol and adrenaline during service, even when nothing is going wrong. The perfectionism that develops is particularly insidious because it's rewarded. In restaurant culture, perfectionism isn't a character flaw, it's a virtue. The chef who remakes dishes 5 times is called dedicated. The chef who makes people cry with criticism is called demanding a high standard. The chef who sacrifices relationships for the kitchen is called committed. Society reinforces the exact behaviors that are psychologically destructive. By the private chef phase, something critical has happened. The audience has disappeared. In a restaurant, there's feedback. Critics review your food. Customers respond. Other chefs respect your work. But as a private chef, you're cooking in near-total isolation. Your only feedback is from one or a few people, and these people are paid clients, not genuine human beings interested in you. They're interested in what you produce. This is psychologically devastating for someone who's built their entire identity around being excellent. Excellence without witness is just work, and work without meaning is just suffering. Yet you can't acknowledge this because doing so would require admitting that all the sacrifice, the relationships destroyed, the experiences foregone, the years spent in pursuit of perfection, was potentially for nothing. The cocaine use that typically develops at the celebrity chef level isn't incidental. It's adaptive. Cocaine allows you to feel powerful and in control in a life where you're increasingly powerless and out of control. It allows you to feel something when you've trained yourself to feel nothing. It allows you to maintain the performance when the genuine person underneath has completely disappeared. What separates culinary perfectionism from other forms of excellence-pursuing pathology is that it involves creating something consumable, something meant to bring pleasure. But by the time you've reached the peak, you've divorced the act of cooking from pleasure entirely. You're no longer cooking to bring joy. You're cooking to maintain an identity. You're cooking to prove something to people who don't care. You're cooking because you've forgotten how to be anything other than a chef. The real tragedy is that the skills themselves are extraordinary. A private chef to billionaires is objectively one of the most skilled people in their field. They're in the top thousandth of 1%. By any rational measure, they've achieved something remarkable. But at what psychological cost? They've gained the world of excellence and lost their soul in the process. The human cost of this life is the slow replacement of the self with a role. You become the chef, nothing but the chef, and the chef becomes a function rather than an identity. You're no longer a person who cooks. You're a cooking apparatus that occupies a human form. And the tragedy is that this transformation happens so gradually, with so much social approval, that by the time you realize it, you've already vanished. If you want to explore more forbidden lives and what they do to the human mind, subscribe to Doctor of POV.